A big welcome to everyone here. We are very delighted to have you here with us. My name is Jada, and I'm the Marketing Project Manager at Avalon, and I'm also a passionate educator. Joining us today, we have an expert panel who will be sharing their insights on effective GenAI in UK schools, academies, and MATs. So we're starting strong with Shireen Wilkinson. Shireen is a highly experienced education leader, consultant, and author with over 20 years of experience. Shireen is currently the Executive Director of Education at Leo Academy Trust, where she leads on curriculum, teaching and learning, assessments, and school improvement. Her expertise spans English, assessments, and multi-school leadership, and she has a strong history of impactful school improvement. Shireen will represent the Trust and share their strategic approach to AI in education. So thank you, Shireen, for joining us. And then we have Carles. Thank you. Carles, who is the Avalon Lab Business Director, is an educational technologist with more than 20 years of experience in educational publishing, specializing in creating e-learning solutions that empowers educators and students in K-12 and other educational stages. Thank you, Carles.
Thank you.
And lastly, Reza. Reza Mosavian is an experienced educational professional with a background in teaching, leadership, and edtech. Now at Teachermatic as Senior Partnership Development Manager, he helps institutions harness AI to reduce workload and drive impact. Reza is passionate about innovation and continues to support leaders and educators in shaping the future of teaching and learning. So again, welcome and thank you, Reza.
Thank you.
So we're very much looking forward to an engaging discussion altogether and valuable insights from their expertise. But before we begin, just a few quick points. The chat function has been disabled for this session, but don't worry, we welcome your questions via the Q&A tab here on Zoom that you can find below. And we'll aim to address as many questions as possible towards the end of the session. Also, please note that the webinar is being recorded and the recording will be shared via email next week after the event. And with that, let's just get started. I'm very happy to pass it on over to Carles.
Jada, thank you so much for your introduction. And before we properly start asking questions to Riza and to Shireen, I will start just by a brief explanation on the context in which we are right now, both the educational community and the edtech industry in regards to a GenAI-based applications and their impact they're having on the sector, right? So as we know, in 2022, we had the release of GPT 3.5. And ever since then, we have seen how the edtech industry has been trying to harness the creative potential of these tools, right? Both for creating personalized learning or creating, let's say, feedback and assessment applications and tools of this style. So from that moment on, we have seen a wave of applications coming in. And at the same time, we have seen a rapid adoption by the educational community of these applications. So students, teachers, institutions have been adopting very quickly GenAI-based tools. In a recent report commissioned by Avalon, which by the way, it's downloadable freely if you want to, and that has inspired this series of webinars, this report pointed out to a series of benefits of introducing these tools in schools and the classrooms. These benefits were summarized as boosting activity, enhancing creativity, improving content quality, content personalization, etc. But at the same time, one of the takeaways or some of the takeaways from the reports was that there was a clear need for a correct AI strategy, AI literacy among the staff, and the need for clear guidelines and training. And we would like to cover these areas with the three of us, in particular, what it affects to UK schools, academies, and MATs. And with having said that, I'll address my first question to Shireen. Shireen, as Executive Director of Leo, what has been your Multi-Trust Academy approach to Gen AI?
Carlos, thank you so much for introducing, and lovely to see everyone on the panel. It's an absolute pleasure to discuss AI in education today. So I'm really passionate about it. And as Giada said, I'm Director of Education for Leo Academy Trust, and we're a trust made up of 9 schools, soon to be 11, very soon, and we're based in London and Surrey. We serve 5,500 pupils, and the trust was set up in 2015. So today I'm talking on behalf of our digital lead, Cheryl Shirley, and also it's very well and strategically led by our CEO, Philip Hedger. So our trust has been on, I would say, an exciting journey. And we're really eager to share our insights and experiences with you. So we've always strived to be at, I would say, the forefront of education. So AI is no different. So anything that comes, we want to be at the forefront and making sure that we're there and we're up to date with everything that's happening. And it's another thread of our digital strategy, which we've had now for about a decade. So we're committed to workload. And we had to, when we first started thinking about it, think about the why. So why are we doing this? So it's the workload, it's the well-being for staff. And Cheryl set up a working party to trial some of the AI aspects. And we had what we call keen adopters. And they were people who trialed the tools in class, trialed how to use prompts, because whatever you put in, you get out when it comes to AI. And we unpicked the best prompts and AI models for our schools, and then had continuous feedback. And as part of that, we adopted a trust-wide approach. So we trialed it first before having an AI strategy. We adopted that approach, and then we had agreed tools across the trust that we would use to support teachers, to support staff, and also to support our pupils. And of course, as part of that strategy, we made sure we looked at protecting staff and protecting data as a key aspect of that.
Thank you, Shireen. I guess one of the most challenging parts of this strategy is to, in a way, achieve a cohesive approach across all the schools belonging to the organization, right? How have you gone about this? How can you ensure that the tools are being applied with the same principles and in the same way?
I think one of the most important things was that we have a digital lead who leads on AI, and I think that's really important. And so that is Cheryl Shirley, and she leads on AI. And with the working party and working with the digital champions, and they are teachers in school who are trialing and using them every day, they decided to have a list which were trialed of what Cheryl felt were tools that were applicable for all schools. So we had that consistency, we had that alignment, so we didn't have different apps in different places. So all of the tools that we use in terms of apps are aligned and are the same. So we have that equity in our schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Shireen. Reza, now let me ask you, why should schools, academies, and trust consider using AI tools? What are the benefits, the potential risks, and as you mentioned once, what are they missing if they are not using them?
Of course, I think firstly, just to echo Shireen's comments, thank you so much for the wonderful opportunity to be part of this panel and for the introductions. And again, as part of my role, I'm very privileged and fortunate to be able to work with not just schools and multi-academy trusts, but also further education establishments and higher education too. So I get to be in the fortunate position by where I see the full scale, end to end, in terms of where the opportunities and limitations of AI exist at the moment. But in response to the question, I think Shireen beautifully sort of alluded to some of the key points there in terms of the opportunities and some of the risks associated to it. And I think one thing that's happening across the sector, of course, is that everybody's seeing the immediate opportunity or value being within the workload reduction, which of course then segues into the mental health and well-being agenda that's in place in terms of trying to enable our colleagues to work more efficiently and focus on actually the job at hand here, which is to provide the best student experience possible and leading to successful outcomes. However, if we kind of consider where AI, again, where I've seen firsthand having a very dramatic positive effect on institutions, is utilizing it as a force for good. So thinking about it in terms of in the context of adaptive learning. Again, we are serving our students from varied demographics and backgrounds, but also with in some cases, complex needs. What we're finding is that AI can be that assistant to you in terms of your day-to-day practice to help you think creatively and think outside the box. Because again, as a former lecturer and teacher myself, is that you can be guilty of being consumed by the day-to-day pressures of, you're not just teaching, but then you're chasing attendance, or you're having to go to staff meetings and doing a whole range of different tasks at hand. So it's seeing it as an opportunity, as an agent, as an assistant that can help you think in those contexts. Of course, again, I think Shireen mentioned some of the risks associated to it in terms of the approach that Leo Academy have taken. I think that at the moment we need to have careful management, but not to the point by where it can be a risk of not using it. I think the opportunity is definitely in place. If we think about some of the tools that are being widely used out there at the moment, I think there's that challenge between something that we've been talking about for years in terms of digital literacy, and now we are throwing in AI literacy into the mix. And I think that school leaders are having to think about this and what does that mean on top of the digital literacy strategy that we're trying to push at, meaning that essentially we need to make sure we have oversight over the data privacy that Shireen's already alluded to. And some sort of kind of key takeaways are, not a lot of people realize that if you're using the free tools, you're at risk of feeding the large language models that sit behind AI. So what does that mean for us as an organization, as an entity, and how can we overcome those by, having, I suppose, the knowledge in the first instance, but then also being able to be signposted to the appropriate tools as well. But ultimately, I think as a takeaway response to this question is that AI absolutely needs to be seen as an enhancement tool and not something that's going to be either at the risk of replacing any human being or their experience in their skill sectors, but equally not at the risk of it not being used moving forward as well.
Thank you, Reza. I fully agree with you in how you tackle the AI literacy need on just adding the AI literacy to all those programs that were already there. So in a way, all those MATs that were already diligent enough to have digital literacy and digital competency programs in place, it will be fairly natural to them to add this new discipline into their training programs. And then speaking of this, and then Shireen and Leo, how do you use AI throughout its different organizational levels for your central staff, for your teaching staff, for your pupils? How do you address that?
Yeah, we've really been focused on sharing resources that use AI tools specifically for leadership, management, administration. So we have 3 tiers. So tier 1 would be for the teachers to support them with their professional learning, to create resources. And then we have a premium level, which we use more at management level. And the reason for that is that the premium level can act as a scribe in meetings, can be your personal assistant, can be your minute taker. And when you're working at a more senior level or central, you will be doing meetings, you'll be writing up reports, and you will need those minutes of those meetings. So that's useful. Whereas a class teacher might not necessarily need to be taking minutes of meetings because they're at the chalk face with the children. So those are the kind of levels, if you like, that we use. So those sort of 3 levels, kind of middle level, and then obviously that more premium level. We recognise, though, that AI is fast-paced, and things that we couldn't do 6 months ago, we might be able to do now and ongoing. So we haven't committed to any particular tools. So we have them on a 1-year contract, and then we're regularly looking and seeing what would work for us as an organisation. We like to stay agile, and we like to use the best tools that are available. And underpinned by our AI strategy is making sure that we've got that robust infrastructure. So every child, for example, has a one-to-one device. Our staff have one-to-one device as well. And we make sure that we provide training. So, for example, on our inset day in September, all of the trust had training on how to use AI. And then we had small groups and working parties having further training on how to use more complex AI. So yes, we have a free tiered approach to our tools, but also we have things like cameras in the classroom also to support, which also AI could be supported by as well. And we're making sure that we're being efficient and we're saving workload for our teachers. So yes, building on what Reza said, within that, we're making sure that, we're not sharing data that doesn't need to be shared as well, and keeping in line with GDPR requirements.
See, Shireen, I don't want to put you on the spot now, but you mentioned that you are kind of rotating and exploring constantly for different tools. Would you dare to say how many applications can you currently be managing at your MAT, more or less?
I'm sure it's online. I'm sure Cheryl has it, but we actually publish our digital tools online, so you can see all of the apps that we use. So eventually we will finalize those, but won't be in our catalog at the moment. But the digital tools that we use that are powered by AI, so we're not talking about generative AI, but powered by AI, are actually online in we call it our digital package. So eventually we will finalize that, but we'd like to trial that to begin with.
Nice, but I think it's also very transparent that you can show that also to the parents of your organization, that everybody's clear on the tools that you're using. I think that's also very valuable.
Yes. Yeah, because for the children who are aged 7 to 11, they can take the one-to-one devices home. And so they can use those at home. And for the children who perhaps can't afford it, we're passionate about that. Then we pay for the internet for those children. So, that all children can access the apps, so that we have equality of opportunity for our pupils.
Great, thanks. Reza, going back to the report that we were mentioning earlier, the report talks about some schools appointing digital champions, as Shireen also has mentioned earlier, in order to test AI tools and then to recommend them or not. Tell us a little bit about your experience. Do you know other schools that do this sort of similar approach or other approaches in order to discover and recommend tools?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Shireen touched on this point as a very good use case in terms of assigning digital champions to lead on this. Because in those cases, more likely than not, they may have further capacity to be able to actually put the research and the time that's required for this to then best inform colleagues moving forward. But to answer the question, of course, we're seeing a growing number of UK schools and MATs adopt this digital champion model. Which is proving to be the absolute effective way to do it. Now, where I've seen it be of most value, of course, is where you assign those who are still in the classroom, because they are bound to the day-to-day pressures of the timetable, or at least at minimum come from a teaching and learning background, because they'll be able to take the solution in mind and then correlate it back to the opportunities that it provides. But an example is, having an AI lead sort of teachers forum as an example. This is enabling colleagues to be able to trial generative AI in specific areas, whether that's specific areas related to their subject or whether it's specific areas in relation to the task at hand. So, are we looking at AI to support us specifically on lesson planning, or is it for schemes of work generation, or whether it's just specifically around assessment for learning strategies? So I think context and themes can be really, really helpful as part of this approach, rather than having a high level. We know we need to do generative AI. We're not quite sure where or why or how. So I think wrapping a bit of structure around it can definitely help as well. But similarly linked to the report that you mentioned, Carlos, is that a school in London, the approach that they took as part of the pilot project was again, that exactly they did the looking at generative AI as a lesson planning tool within a small group of teachers. And the feedback that they had was on an iterative basis by where they were able to fine tune what it could do versus, of course, how that complements what they have done historically speaking. And one of the outputs from that was, of course, is the time saving aspects again. Again, as a former teacher myself, I remember those days where on a weekend I would get those weekend anxieties about thinking about the amount of lessons I need to plan across the many groups that I was teaching for. So AI can definitely help from that point of view as well. But ultimately, I think to round off is what I'm seeing it being effective is yes, digital champions are an effective way where possible. And having somebody that either comes from a teaching and learning background or is within the teaching and learning timetable at present can help. And I think there's very much power in having a peer-led approach because I think, again, from my experience of being a senior leader with regards to leading on education technology initiatives, there's nothing worse than being imposed upon. So I think that if you can win hearts and minds through a collaborative approach, specifically around AI, because to a lot of people, it's still new. I appreciate that as a panel, and I'm sure a lot of my colleagues that have joined the webinar, we may deem ourselves as maybe confident in that particular space. But however, there are a lot of colleagues that are still catching up. So I think that peer-led approach has a lot of power and shouldn't be underestimated either.
Very interesting. I also agree on bottom-up, let's say bottom-up approaches in order to offer technological options that management can see because they are adding educational value, and that comes, let's say, with the endorsement of the educators themselves. So yeah, I think that really makes sense. Talking about other ways to explore time-saving practices. Shireen, you were mentioning while we were preparing these sessions and previous meetings that you yourself use, for example, GenAI tools for report writing or for doing writing models for children. Tell us a little bit how you got through these practices and what are the benefits.
I just wanted to agree with Reza actually. Having someone leading on it, whether it be in the school or academy or multi-academy trust, makes a huge difference. So I just wanted to echo that, and having Cheryl being our AI champion and leading on it has really made a difference. I love AI and I use it every day. And I was one of those people who were last to get a mobile phone. So you're looking at someone who wasn't into tech and was very anti it 20 plus years ago. But I see the benefits now. This morning, let's just take this morning. I visited a school. I spoke to some pupils. I watched lessons. I spoke to the senior leaders, and I now have a report to write. So during that session, I wrote up some notes on my notebook, which I shall be very dutifully scanning and uploading typed. And so that will go into my notes. And I wrote some notes, and literally after this, I'm going to put it into AI, say, these are my notes, please write it in Ofsted style, which is, for those of you not in UK, that's our inspectors. And my report will be written within 5-10 minutes. And so last year, without AI, that would have taken me half a day, an hour, 2 hours to write up. So it's really making it efficient. Similarly, when I first started teaching, which was 23 years ago, we'd write models for writing, we'd create our own, put in. But now if you get the right prompt, you can say, year 3, I'd like a model for some geography writing. I would like this. Make sure the prompt is right. The prompt is the big thing. Make sure your prompt is right. And it will produce it within 5 seconds. And I think that is, a complete change and a very welcome change within our Academy Trust. So they're just some small examples, but saving time and making myself more efficient as an executive leader, but also our teachers are being more efficient. So almost preaching to the converted, because I do love AI, bearing in mind I was the last to get a mobile phone. So I'm on it this time round.
And Shireen, just out of curiosity, how reliable, how much work do you have to add to those reports once they are converted? Do you have to go back a lot into them?
Such a good question. Yes, you have to make sure that it's accurate to what you've said. You have to edit it. You can't, just do it, let it put it in, and then you have to edit it. But what it's saving is the drafting time, where you're drafting it, so at least you've got the draft. Now you can edit it and make it your own. And I'm quite open about it. I will say I'm going to write up this report. I'm going to use AI to help me. Because people know I will tweak it and edit it and personalize it. That's the word, personalize. I will personalize it for schools. So that I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think this also kind of covers something that we're going to treat a little bit later, but that we need to take AI as what it is, as a generator of, in this case, GenAI tools as generators of outputs, but in any case that need to be overviewed and need to be required the action of teachers and educators, in this case of you as the person that produced the notes and wants to validate them as well. And then Reza, sorry, we were talking about saving time, but you were mentioning also in your opening bit that you were seeing also GenAI tools with a great potential for enhancing learning, right? And in this context, how do you think teachers and educators are using GenAI for exploring new activities, new teaching practices, new methodologies? Can you tell us about your experience on that?
Yeah, of course. So of course, some of the obvious points of what we've referred to already in terms of resource creation. But the beauty of witnessing what I am privileged to do so on a day-to-day basis is that once colleagues overcome that initial step of some of the myths that may surround AI, or the hesitation around the fear factor that surrounds AI, is that they start to effectively connect the dots as to, hang on a minute, this can do so much for me. And that can be in the context of, I think I've touched on it already, in terms of adaptive learning. So again, we cater for such a wide demographic of learners. And therefore, how can I leverage generative AI to support me with that adaptive learning, those adaptive learning strategies to ensure that that individual is catered for, to support them achieve the best they can possibly achieve in the time that they're with me as a teacher and as an educator. The others are around sort of enhancing creativity. So again, we've all been there. We've all been guilty of doing something the same way for a period of time. And what, again, subject to the tools that you're using, what you can leverage AI for is that you can put those materials through it, again, subject to the platforms and all the security aspects that we've discussed already, and use it as your agent to think, say, can we deliver this in another particular way? So I've worked firsthand with educators up and down the country where they may have very, very kind of, let's use of a better term, dry topics that they have to deliver with students. And history has taught them that it's makes for a very challenging lesson to keep them engaged. So you can utilize AI as your agent to be able to seek alternative ways of delivering that, and making it more engaging for your students. But one big area which I'm seeing be completely transformational for a lot of teachers up and down the UK is around the instant feedback and assessment. So again, we appreciate that, I remember as a teacher, I used to get asked, what's the favorite part of your job? I'd say, when I'm in the classroom. What do you enjoy least? When I'm outside of the classroom, because of all the various different tasks and that you have to sort of fulfill. And whilst it's very important, of course, marking and assessment, it's a very time-consuming process for any teacher, especially you have multiple groups, and those groups are made up of various different numbers of students. So it's how can you leverage AI and how can you utilize AI as a force for good to help you get through marking and assessment. And one of the benefits, of course, it can provide is it will do it on an unbiased basis, because the AI hasn't formed those relationships or the emotional aspects with the student. So again, put very crudely, I may be teaching Joe Bloggs, who's a challenging student. There may be some unconscious bias. What the AI won't have is that. However, that doesn't go without saying, of course, which is a critical point, and I think we've all mentioned it a few times, is that we need to be very mindful that we are the subject matter experts. We know our subject best, we know our students best. And whilst the AI can support us overcome those laborious tasks, it still requires our input to ensure the accuracy of what it has outputted is there. But ultimately, it enables me to add what truly matters to the students is the personalized feedback. because the AI has managed to mark that piece of work in 30 seconds rather than the 30 minutes it would have took me traditionally, I can now focus with the time that I have back on rounding off that personalized feedback and supporting my students to achieve far greater things as part of the assessment criteria moving forward as well.
Reza, I think that you cover or you touch a very important point, which has to do with what we were mentioning just a while ago about validating the output of this generated content. In this sense, it's even more critical because we're talking about an assessment or a feedback in which in this case the educator, the teacher needs to be has the educational context, has the pedagogic expertise, knows the student, knows what it's is around the educational situation, and can add that vision to whatever feedback is coming from the Gen AI tool, right? So
yeah,
I was going to say mainly that I think this is important for academies and schools to keep in mind, in the sense that I'm sure that there will be pressure or maybe features coming from products that will even release automatized feedback that doesn't even go through the teachers. And I think that at that point, it's kind of up to the philosophy of the schools to say, hey, no, we want to keep the teacher on top. We want to, it's not all about time saving. It's about, using this instrumentally, right, to give us a help. But the educational decision belongs to the teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what one other thing that AI is forcing on a far grander scale is again from my personal point of view is forcing everybody to think about our assessment methods. Because of course there's so many different terminology that exists at the moment, some buzzwords in terms of AI can hallucinate, of course, which is valid. But equally I often get involved in discussions around plagiarism and AI checkers and all those kind of key things as well. But I think what we're trying to do is not overcome the fact that we've been doing the same thing the same way for nearly the best part of a century when it comes to assessment methods. So with this radical shift in the use of technology and specifically AI in that realms I think as leaders, as kind of powers greater than us potentially is that we need to really start to think about what is it that we want to do with young people with regards to the assessment methods. And let's not just default to those controlled assessment environments. Let's think creatively, let's think outside the box and make it more engaging for our students as well, to overcome a lot of those key things that we've alluded to already.
Thank you, Reza. And speaking about thinking, I think also a very important question in this case addressed to Shireen. It's about critical thinking, right? How important do you think the development of critical thinking skills is for students and educators when it comes to approaching and using Gen AI tools?
I think that's such a good question, Carlos. So it is a question, and I'm going to answer it probably in about two words, but very important is the answer. And children need and teachers need agency. They need to be able to know if something's right or something's wrong. And I think I want to build on what Reza said, which was really pertinent. We do need to look at, just because we've been doing it for hundreds of years, does it mean it's the right thing? And I think that's a good point that you said. So AI enhances the feedback that we give to pupils. So we do use a platform to upload writing, and it will give feedback, but we have parameters around that. So the feedback isn't given out until the teacher, because the teacher has agency and can personalize, the teacher has seen it. So it saved the teacher time, but the teacher also needs to have agency and see it and make sure it's right within the context of their classroom and what they're doing. So to answer your question, instead of in terms of critical thinking, yes, critical thinking is incredibly important in the digital age and in the age of generative AI. It does enhance our knowledge of what we know, and it enhances it. But we've got to have those skills to look at multiple sources. if something's come out. We've still got to know how to use a capital letter and full stop to know how to edit and change and tweak once we've got that draft from generative AI. So I think knowledge is going to be really important. Knowing knowledge of subjects, background knowledge of things will equally be important in the digital age, and critical thinking will be vital with all of the social media, but also in the age of generative AI. So I've kind of summarized it there. 2 words, very important.
Yeah, Shireen, and I couldn't agree more. I think if critical thinking was already basic before the era of Gen AI, I think it becomes kind of at the forefront of skills that need to be achieved, because it implies, having this attitude towards what you are receiving, and, not taking anything at face value just because it's being provided by a very smart and advanced technological tool, but that we know that it's not a thinking tool. It's producing via algorithms and via programming a very precise predictive text, but that can be wrong, right? And so it's very, very important that teachers understand that, educators understand that, students understand that, that as you were saying, to foster skills of, peer reviewing, or go to other sources, but have this attitude toward, okay, I've got this, let me check, right? So yeah, I fully agree with you. All right, so let's move to another question then. Reza, based on your experience again in UK schools, academies, and trust, are they providing clear guidelines on the use of Gen AI tools to teachers and students?
Yeah, I think just to stay on theme of using minimal words as a direct response, I think the one word is mixed is the word I would use. So at the moment, there's a significant variation that seems to be in place across schools, generally speaking. However, we have seen some MATs, and Leo Academy, of course, is a great example of that, where they are ahead of the curve in relation to their thinking about this and some of the processes that they've put in place. So yeah, in some cases where there is evidence that they have developed clear policies outlining what is acceptable or not, or what the expectations are. For instance, some schools that I've worked with is that they have a very clear AI usage framework in place that covers areas across the ethical use of AI, for example, but also including the student engagement aspect in terms of working with students to say, you can utilize AI, but just make sure that you're transparent about where you've used it and cite it. And again, that's just about embracing the fact that there has been a big shift in the way that we do things, and the fact that we need to embrace it as well. And of course, the other things that the framework and the policies cover specifically, and these aren't in any particular order by any stretch of the imagination, but around data protection and privacy. And I think by addressing the data protection and privacy aspect within any framework or policy, you're setting the mandate or the expectation and understanding for your peers across your trust in terms of, these are the tools that are deemed as appropriate, and these are the tools that are not. And in some cases, we've seen, organizations take a hard stance on ChatGPT is not to be used in the context of your work in practice. And again, that can vary from that point of view. But I think ultimately where I've seen it being done really well is as part of the frameworks, is providing those guidelines for AI when it comes to what does that mean in terms of lesson plan creation, or what does that mean in terms of schemes of work creation, or any other assessment for learning outputs that you might want to create for it as well. But I think in summary, Carlos, is that I think many schools are still very much in exploratory mode. And I think that there are a lot of leaders and colleagues, those digital champions that we've talked about already, that are testing AI's potential ultimately before making that final commitment in terms of standardization and formalizing that in any trust. But I think the best approach is to, where possible, where you have capacity, where you have confidence, is to get ahead of the curve and put in those policies to help you evolve as an organization, as a collective. And of course, that can mean, it doesn't have to be the big bang approach. You can start very small scale and doing those AI trials with some of the tools that are out there and available for institutions. And I think that peer-led approach forms part of that in terms of gathering your teachers' feedback on where it's adding value, where it's truly having an impact, whether that's workload reduction, whether that's enhanced creativity, and then all of that correlated together. Ultimately, what you want to see is that it leads to better outcomes for your learners and your young people. But yeah, I think in summary, mixed is the answer to that particular question in terms of where organizations are at the moment.
Thank you, Reza. This is very clear, and I think it also touches on a reality. I think right now the industry and the educational sector are moving very quickly. At the same time, the regulators, the local governments, and supranational governments like the EU are moving at the same pace and releasing documentation, recommendations, guidelines, and it's all coming together. So it's many schools are learning about the guidelines while they are using the tools themselves. I wanted to say that, for example, recently we had in January the release of the safety expectations guidelines for of the UK, right, which kind of give a very practical approach to what schools should be aware of when adopting GenAI tools, and it gives a very non-technical and hands-on approach to kind of what you should expect and and what your AI system deployer or the company that the product that you're adopting, what expectations they should adhere to. So I recommend everybody to, especially in the UK, to take a look at those, which are recommendations for England, by the way. I think that they will be translated then or transferred into other nations in the UK. But I also wanted to comment regarding, for example, what you were saying, the privacy and data governance. Other guidelines that can be useful also for schools, academies, and MATs, like the ones that come from the EU in terms of the use of artificial intelligence and data in teaching and learning for educators. These are some very practical guidelines specifically addressed for educators that are very easy to understand and that allow them to assess whether a specific tool is it's going to be safe and trustworthy. And for example, if we talk about privacy and data governance, I'm going to read out from the recommendations themselves what specific bullet points is the guidelines. It's a guideline providing for teachers and educators, right? For example, they go into privacy and data governance. They say, are there mechanisms to ensure that sensitive data is kept anonymous? Are there procedures in place to limit access to the data only to those who need it? So that would be something to look into while you're doing this process of adoption. Again, is access to learner data protected and stored in a secure location and used only for the purposes for which the data was collected? One more. Is there a mechanism to allow teachers and school leaders to flag issues related to privacy and data protection? Are learners and teachers informed about what happens with their data? How is it used and for what purposes? Another one, is it possible to customize the data privacy and data settings? And the last one, does the AI system comply with general data protection regulation? So these are little bullet points that kind of spark the conversation when you are in front of your of the tool that you're adopting, and you can go through this, let's say, checklist and say, okay, is this compliant? Am I adopting a safe tool in terms of data protection? And I think this could be sort of a guideline, some guidelines that can be helpful for to taking these sort of decisions. All right, let's go with one of the most maybe non-controversial, but I think very interesting question. In the report, some teachers were saying or were kind of pointing out to the possibility of will GenAI ever replace us, right? Is there a future in which we are going to see schools totally run by GenAI tools? And I would just like to know your opinion on this topic proposition. both of you. Whoever wants to start first.
I have a very direct answer is no, it will not replace, but I'll allow Shireen to sort of as either agree or disagree with my response, and then hopefully we can have a bit of a debate and elaborate on it.
Yeah, perhaps we can elaborate. No is the answer. I don't think it will replace teachers. It will enhance our work. I think the word is enhance, and support the work that we do. But no, I work with primary. We have children from age 2 to 11. We need human beings with our children to support them. So that's my short answer as well.
Okay, I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. Okay, just to keep pushing here. Maybe there's not a future in which we see class, completely computerized and run by GenAI tools, but is there a scenario where essential educational actions are transferred to GenAI tools, and is that positive or not?
I think this is a difference in terms of, I think Shireen, you utilised the terminology at the start of the webinar in terms of artificial intelligence aided processes. So, if you think about it in the context of processing student records and identifying a reduction in student attendance and retention and achievement, I think there's definitely a place for automation of those things. But again, that's acting as a force for good to be able to highlight and enable you to identify where maybe you're at risk with particular things. But ultimately, I think regardless of how sophisticated it gets, that emotional relationship and awareness between one human and another can never be replaced by any technology. And I think that that's something that our young people crave. I say young people, as adults, we crave as well. And I think that is imperative to anyone's success, really, moving forward as well. So again, I think the word enhance is a good word to use. Thank you, Shireen, for that. But yeah, I can't see it replacing that physical setting. There may be a hybrid, but I can't see it being solely remote and delivered by an AI-aided robot in any way, shape, or form. Absolutely not.
Good to know. I just want to add, I completely agree with you, but I want to kind of test and see where you think we are. I kind of also envision that it will also depend very much on the philosophy of each educational institution, right? So there will be maybe more humanistic institutions that will be very aligned to what you were saying. There will be others that will say, okay, we're going to automatize more, right? So I think that at the end of the day, it will depend on having a very humanistic approach to education, to understanding what you were saying, this human aspect of learning that cannot be transferred to a GenAI tool that needs to be, centered in the center of the educational process. Good. So I think we might be reaching to the end of the roundtable. Jada, let me know if we're good on time.
Yes, perfectly fine. Thank you very much, Carlos and Reza and Shireen. You made some very interesting and significant contributions. So thank you so much for this very engaging discussion. Great, amazing. So I think we're right on time, which is perfect. I just want to extend a big thank you again to all of you, Reza, Shireen, and Carlos, for being here today. We had a very engaging discussion all together about all these benefits of generative AI and how to be sure that we're using the right tools. So thank you very much for your input on that. And also a big thank you to the audience who's been very patient and active as well with the questions. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye.